We're going to work on the Java Jam case study in this tutorial, so if you want to follow along in the book, an overview starts on page 190, but the actual instructions start on page 191. For task 1, I'm just going to kind of tell you, it does tell you to move some files, but I've already put those in your folder, so you don't have to worry about that. But just make sure that you are opening the files from your Chapter 4 folder. So we'll have a Java Jam, a Fish Creek, and a Pacific Trails for each chapter. When you start working on these case studies, make sure you are opening the files for that particular chapter. So in your Chapter 4 files, go to Case Studies, Java Jam, and we'll open index, javajam.css, and menu.html in Visual Studio Code. Instructions on page 191 for task 2 says replace the relax at Java Jam text contained in the H2 with follow the winding road to Java Jam. Step 2 says to code an image tag for the winding road JPEG image above the H2 element in the main content area. So above the H2, but still within the main, we need to code right there. Be sure to include the alt, height, and width attributes. Also configure the image to appear to the right of the text by coding the align right attribute. The validator for W3C will indicate that align right attribute is invalid because technically we should use CSS to do this, but we haven't learned the properties to configure our images on our page yet. So we're going to do it the old way before CSS was a thing. Okay, so here we need an image tag, and our src is the name of the file, which was windingroad.jpg. It said to give it some alt text, but it didn't specify what to give it. So just anything valid that kind of describes the picture. I'll just say a winding road. And then it says to give the width and height, but it does not tell us the width and height. So we need to look those up. If you open your files in Finder, or if you're using PC, your File Explorer, you can right-click on the file. So find Winding Road JPEG, right-click. On a Mac, we do get info. I think on a PC, it's properties. When you do that, you'll see something like dimensions. I'm not quite sure what it is on a PC. And our dimensions are 400 by 300. It's 400 wide and 300 tall. So we can use that for our width and height. Our width, 400. Our height, 300. And then it said to add the align right attribute. And notice that code doesn't like that. It knows that we should do that with CSS, so it's telling us it's wrong, but we'll fix that in a future chapter, okay? Let's make sure this works by checking it in a browser, and if we refresh, yes, we do have our image here. Step 3 says to add a paragraph below the H2 element. And step 4 says to add an H3 element below the paragraph. So I'm going to add those, and then you can just copy them over in a moment. Okay, pause the video if you need to. This is the text that we should add below that H2, follow the winding road to Java Jam. We have a paragraph, and then an H3 that says Java Jam Coffee House features. Once you have that in, double check in a browser and make sure yours looks something like this. Now we'll move on to the menu page. In the menu page, and step 1 is on page 192, we're going to code an image tag above the H2 element in the main content area. So above the H2, below that opening main. And this will be for mugs.jpg. We'll give it an alt text of mugs. And we need to know its width and height. So again, we'll open up that in Finder, our folder in Finder. We'll right click on mugs, get info, and we see that its dimensions are 400 by 299. So a width of 400, a height of 299. And again, we're going to do that align right Okay, the next step is to add a paragraph below the H2 element. So below coffee at Java Jam. Okay, pause the video to copy your text over. I misspelled caffeine. Didn't I? Didn't I? Sure did. Okay, double check your spelling too, and then view it in the browser, and you should have something that looks like this. Open your javajam.css, and on task 5, page 193, the first step is to modify the body element selector style rules to configure background GIF as the background image. Okay, so when we're doing CSS now, we need to make sure that we first do not already have a selector. So look into your selectors, and we do indeed have a body. So we don't have to create a new body selector. We just need to add that background image there. So if you recall, the property is background image. And what do I do now? Do I just do background.gif? No, that's not right. Remember, for this value, you have to include URL like that. Okay, so if we look in the browser, refresh this, that puts a little pattern background. Step 2 says modify the style rules for the wrapper ID. Configure the background color. Configure a minimum width using the min width. Configure a maximum width and use the box shadow property. So I'm going to clean my code up here a little bit, and then you can skip forward with the magic of technology. Okay, so this is what I've added to the wrapper. We've set a background color. We've set a min width. That means the wrapper is never going to get smaller than 900 pixels no matter how small our browser goes. And it's never going to get wider than 1280 pixels no matter how big our browser goes. And then it added a box shadow. In the instructions, it did not tell us what box shadow to configure or what value to use. So I'm just doing a 3 pixel, and then a dark gray that's part of our color theme. It's an evil color. Okay, no, just JK. Okay, so if we refresh our document, now we have that gray border drop shadow around the edge. Step 3 says to modify the header element. So if we look, we already have a header, so we need to make sure we're there. Remove the text align declaration and code a declaration to set the height to 150 pixels and configure the declarations to display the JavaJam logo.jpg as a background image without repeating. So we'll do background image URL JavaJam logo.jpg. What? It's not letting me select that like I normally do. And then we'll do background repeat, no repeat. Okay, notice I did not mean to take my semicolon off there, so double check, make sure you've got your semicolons, everything in the correct place. And let's check it in the browser, make sure it works. Now we have that logo there, okay? Modify the H1 selector rules, remove the line height declaration, and configure declarations to set a top padding of 45 pixels. So it's not padding top. I mean, it's not top dash padding, it's padding dash top. Woo! I have so much fun recording these videos. And then a left padding, so it's padding dash left of 220 pixels. And we'll set our font size to 3M. Okay, so double check that, and then let's look at it in the browser. And now this will be our logo, and that works for all of our pages since we're doing this external CSS. Step 5, modify the nav element selector rules. configure declarations for a 1.5 em font size and 10 pixels of top padding. Okay, so I'm going to do font size 1.5 em and padding dash top 10 pixels. Let's look at that now. So we should see a difference here. There we go. Code a new style rule to prevent hyperlinks in the nav area from displaying the default underline. Okay, so this default underline is for text links. It just happens as part of the browser defaults that happen with an anchor tag. If you want to get rid of those, we do text decoration none. So we need to configure a new selector. I'm going to go down here at the end, and we're going to do nav space A. Now this is called a descendant selector. Descendant selectors are very common in CSS. That means go to the nav section and only apply this to the anchors that are within the nav section. Okay, so text decoration none. Okay, and then let's look at this in the browser, and you should see these go away. Okay, if we would have just done A, like if we would have not had a nav here and just done the A, then it would have also removed, oh, did a wrong thing. It would have also removed the underline from down here, and maybe we didn't want that at this point. Okay, maybe we wanted anchors everywhere else to have underlines and not on our nav section. So using a descendant selector like nav A allows us to specifically target only the anchors within the nav section. Those are called descendant selectors. Okay, modify the footer element style rules. Okay, so let's find footer. Configure declarations of 10 pixels bottom padding and a solid top border, and it tells us the color to use. Okay, so we want a border. So what's our value for border? We do size first. Remember, 2 pixels size. We do what we want, like what type it is. We're going to say solid, and then the color. And we are using 221811. Okay, so let's see what that looks like in the browser. I'm going to go back to home. And now we have that border. We just wanted a top border though. I put a whole border. See how it puts that black box on there? Let's go fix that. How do we get a top border? We do border dash top. Okay, now let's look at it again. I keep losing my browser window. There we go. Okay, and now we just have it on the top. Okay, add a new style rule for the H4 element selector. Do we have an H4? No, we don't. So we've got to add one that configures a background color, a font size, a left padding, and a bottom padding. So pause the video if you want to type this out. Background color, font size, a padding left, and a padding bottom. And then we'll refresh it in the browser, and these should be our H4s, I believe. Maybe not. Maybe we had, no, our H4s are on our music page right here. Those are our H4s. Okay, add a new style rule for the main element selector. So I'm going to scroll on up. We don't have one already for main, so we'll just go down here. Mouse is having problems today. And we want to configure 2 em of padding on the left, right, and bottom. Okay, so padding, we do have a shortcut way to do padding. We can have 4 potential values. This value would represent the top padding. This would be the right. This would be the bottom. And this would be the left. So think of it as being clockwise, starting with the top, right, bottom, left. Okay? And then we also want to display block. And this is something that we'll talk about a little more when we get to a future chapter. Okay, so let's see how that impacted our code and refresh. And now we have a little extra white space you see over there and there. Okay, let's configure the class for details. On page 194, add a new style rule for the class name details to add 20% left and right padding. Notice how this rule adds empty spaces on either side of the musical performance description and image on the music page. So we'll do a class called details. So classes start with periods. And we'll do padding left 20%, padding right 20%. You could also do the shortcut if you prefer. Either way is correct. They won't count against you. And then if we refresh our browser, nope, need to refresh my browser with an HTML file and not a CSS file. So, and I may not have mentioned that. It's so weird teaching virtually because I'll catch mistakes in the classroom that I don't necessarily catch on the video. But yes, you do have to go back to one of your HTML pages to do an Alt-B. If you do an Alt-B with CSS, it doesn't want to load CSS in a browser. Okay, so this class detail should impact our music page. So if we go to music, notice how we have now 20% padding there and there. That kind of centers it a little bit under our H4s for the months. Okay, one more rule left. Let's add a new style rule for the image element that configures 10 pixels left padding and right padding. So padding left 10 pixels, padding right 10 pixels, and this will give us a little extra space around these pictures, and there we go. Okay, if I stretch this back out, I just have it shrunk a little, then it won't wrap. The text won't wrap anymore. Okay, so remember, you can validate this code, and please on your projects validate your code. That's how I grade it. So if you have a simple mistake, you could have solved that just by validating it. So check it in the validator, and if you get that congratulations, no errors found, then you know you are good. Also check your index, check all of your HTML pages in the validator as well. Okay, it's your job to do the Fish Creek and the Pacific Trails project. Those folders are located in your student files, so make sure you are working with those student files.